first. Start. Hello again. Thank you again for presenting us, bringing us this film, which was for me, who just knew John Berger's writing from reading, and brought in that you bring us into contact with the writing and with the art and with the man and how it intertwines. But that's the common point. I would like to know, as you are from different generations and from different backgrounds, I would like to know from each one of you what was your special, beside the common thing, the special connection to John, his writing and his person. Maybe we start with Bartek.
So, first of all, I studied media studies in England, and if you study the first thing you notice on your reading list is ways of seeing, obviously, and it's strange, but it's a film, it's a book, and also a program which really makes sense. You know, it gives you context for art criticism, and this is my very first moment I heard about John Berger, and so I was delighted to be invited to take part in this project. Also, I didn't have a choice.
I must say, in my generation in Germany, John Berger was not that well known, and I think I owned Ways of Seeing. My sister told me yesterday that I owned it, but I wasn't aware of it really. But when I worked on the first film on Ways of Listening, after that I started reading John Berger, and one of the things I really love about him is that when he went to Quincy, it wasn't going back to the country or leaving kind of the present, and it was not a conservative act, but he went there like to research, and it was kind of a progressive moment. It wasn't going back to Earth or something. So what I love so much about him, that he, until now, he stayed a modernist, and maybe that's because he's a Marxist, but that Colin could explain much better than I, because he was a Marxist just recently.
Well, yes, actually, when I was a student, Berger was incredibly important to me for a book called A Fortunate Man, and also for his book on Picasso, which really did try and put Marxism and modernism together. But then he wrote a book, a novel called G, which I read when I was 21 or 22, and which is really, I think, one of the greatest novels written in English in the 20th century, and certainly the only novel that I've ever read which is really, really good about male desire.
Well, like so many people, Ways of Seeing was my first taste of John Berger. There was one image in that book, which was of course taken from the TV series, which I understand you can find on YouTube, by the way, so it's all up there. There's one image of a Thomas Gainsborough, which is the kind of patriarchal image that I had been brought up amongst, of a lady sitting in a kind of pannier dress and a hat, and a man with a shotgun and a dog against a backdrop of a beautiful landscape. And John just placed a sign beside them saying, "Private property, keep out." And I was in love, you know. He just, with that one image, explained so much that had been puzzling me over the, whatever, 16 years that I've been on Earth. And then the way I met John was through Colin. This is a very family affair. Colin was running the BFI and rang me up one day and said, "Morning, Tilda," it's quite early, or maybe not, but anyway, morning. And And he said, "Now, Tilda, John Berger." And I said, "Yes." That's it. I mean, whatever. It was a film that was being made by a filmmaker called Tilda Swinton, based on a book that a story that John had made with Jean Moore, who's the photographer with whom he very often collaborates. A film made in the Hebrides, which of course was a no-brainer for me since it's my home. And Play Me Something was a film we made, and that's when I met him. And we became incredibly close friends, as you may have worked out.
And the film, we see a short clip in your contribution in Festival. Yeah. The point which I would like to know is, how did you proceed to shape your own personal relationships, different as they are, to John Berger's work and the man, knowing at the same time that that your vision is only, let's say, 25% of a bigger entity, the whole film. I would like to know how you communicated among each other, who should do what, and how these things fit together. Or was that just by accident? I don't think so, but how was it?
Well, maybe it would be useful to talk about how the project was generated in the first place, which was there. Colin and I worked together with Isaac Julian on a film about Derek Jarman called Derek, which was the heart and soul of which was an interview that Colin had very presciently made with Derek a couple of years before he left us. A long interview in which Derek was really up for giving us the goods, and that was a film that we were very proud of and we were extremely happy to have made, because we have it now. And so people who never met Derek can meet him through this film. I mean, of course, we meet an artist through their work, but there are some artists that you really want to meet the man, the woman, you want to be in encounter with them. And Derek is one, and John is another. And it felt to us that the best way to really approach parlaying John to people is to be in encounter with him, because that's really the meat and potatoes of what he does best. He is in engagement with human beings. That's his stock in trade. And each of us individually, obviously. And so we started with the first film, and we were always only going to make one film. We knew that it wasn't going to be much longer than it is, but having made the first, it was just too short. It was just too little John, and we wanted to go back. And so, take up the tale, Colin.
Well, yes, the tale begins in Sundance, which sounds very exciting, except there's no sun and very little dance. And there's a lot of snow, and it was snowing. And Tilda's finished, we just shown Derek, so it was over, and Tilda said, "What about John?" And I was very fed up with asking television executives for money. And I'd sworn, actually, in blood, that I would never again ask a British television executive for money. But we had some of my students, we'd given cameras and editing equipment to. And so we thought we'd do an experiment. And we went up the mountain, and we certainly didn't intend to make a film about winter. But we got in 2 hours ahead of a blizzard, and we made a film about winter. And Tilda is cutting her own role in this, because I remember sitting watching the rushes in the hotel after the end of the 2-day shooting, and she came in and she said, "Well, we've got to make another 3 films." And the idea was that we would make the films about the seasons. And as to how it fitted together, we had one rule, very simple rule, which was that the director would make the final cut of the film that they made. Everybody would argue and talk and etc., but in the end, the decision would be made by the director. And we also had the idea that I had become aware through working with Chris Marker and Isaac Julian of this whole new museum world which shows moving images. And the idea was each film would be a separate work of art. And then maybe at the end, we would put them together and they would make a movie. And today is a very important day for me because I think we made a movie.
So just a practical question, are the films available also one, or is it just as a whole that you distribute them?
That's a question that we will figure out over a beer after this screening.
Okay.
But I think, in my own view, there is the movie, but there are also the individual works of art which can be combined in certain ways. I mean, for example, the Ways of Listening and Harvest go together in a way. I mean, I think there's multiple ways in which they can be shown, to be honest. But the idea is that each one exists by itself as well as part of the film.
And another thing to be said is that because when you started I asked Bartek in the middle, when did we shoot the first one? You said 2012.
No.
What? Earlier?
2010.
2010, okay.
Yeah.
So we started in 2010, and then life, unfolds and things happen, and even though we all intended to make all the films in some configuration, immediately after the first film, my mother became ill, and I was unavailable to work on the second and third films, and then Bobby's mother became ill, and then. In a way, most significantly for the nature of the filmmaking, John Berger's wife, Beverly, became ill. And so everything kind of kept, our plans kept switching, of course, and then we made a very sort of decisive commitment to film whatever was going on. And so spring was spring, but it wasn't necessarily, actually, it's for you to speak about that, Bobby, but it was so much informed by what you found when you went to shoot Spring with John, who wasn't available at all to shoot with you that film, was he?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the whole process of the film was so Berger-esque in a way, because it's the rhythm of life. It's not only that 3 mothers died, it's, I think, 5 babies were born. Bartek, how many do you have? 1. 2. Okay, 2. And Lily has 2, so that makes 4. Walter has 1, the head of post-production. Okay, so it's like 6 babies were born and 3 mothers died. But this is also what Berger writes so much about the rhythm of the nature, and it's the same trees and the same cows and the same snow falling on the grass. And it's what Pig Earth is about. And when we went there for Spring, I mean, we couldn't see him. He wasn't available because his wife died. So we had to do it with what was there, and that was actually the animals. And so it became a film about death and the animals. And then we went back to make the politics film, which was intended to be the Spring film.
Yeah, and I mean, it must be said that in between, we took a long time editing Ways of Listening, because we didn't have a television executive breathing down our necks. We could actually spend a lot of time experimenting, students working on it, etc. And then we took it to Telluride, which sounds glamorous and is glamorous, was particularly glamorous for us because there we met Vijay Vaidyanathan, and he and Adam Bartos provided us with the money for the next 3 films, and so we set out to make a song for politics and Harvest in a much more deliberate way.
Well, and Harvest, even though we, talking of planning, I always intended that we would end with a film in the summer, because we had started in the winter. And in fact, originally, it was going to be about haymaking, because as is, scattered through the other 3 films, the whole theme and practical work and life around haymaking such a heartbeat of John's and Eve's life. And as it happened, about a month before we were going to go and make a film about haymaking and bring the harvest in, bring the hay in with John, Louis, who you see sporadically in the film, who's the farmer who Eve and John work with, who owns the cows that they used to work with, became ill and went into hospital and had to sell his cows. So it didn't become haymaking, it became harvest, and then it became clear to me that having started with fathers, it had to be about children. And so my children and Eve's children take it on. And then another little surprise, John couldn't travel with us for the last film, and again he only told us, I think the day before we arrived in Paris, he had a bad back and he couldn't travel with us, and so I decided that it would be within the kind of realms of his storytelling that he should give these young people a task, and take this very simple task with them up into the mountains where they would meet his child and his grandchildren. And of course it ends with another feast. There's a feast constantly happening in all the films and in John's life. So it sort of, it kept us guessing until the very end.
Has there been a moment in the production of the film where there was danger that it would never be completed? Because I imagine that the death of Beverly must have been a moment very, very difficult for John, of course, but for you from the production side. How did you manage? How did you cope with that?
Well, I remember I was getting off the plane at JFK, and we were all due to fly to Quincy, and I would talk to John about politics. It would have been a dreadful film. Two old men. I mean, anyway, John would have been good, but and I got this message from John that Beverly was very ill, and it was clear that it wasn't going to be possible to do what we intended to do, but I'd already bought the tickets for Bartek and Lily to fly out there, and I had to make a decision about what to do. And I thought, well, the tickets are bought, the tickets not only for them but also for the equipment. What they need is a French translator, so I'll get Jean to go with them. I won't go because I don't have enough money to go there. And we'll just go and they'll film whatever they can film. And then we'll see what we can do. So, I mean, we didn't know we were going to be able to finish the films until VJ and Adam came to the aid of the party. But at the same time, it wasn't an anxious not filming, because we weren't beholden to anybody. We were just trying to do what we were trying to do. And Derek Jarman always told me, that every problem is an opportunity, and that every moment which looks as though it means you can't do what you want to do is actually going to enable you to do something even better. So that was really the philosophy behind the
It's this what Ben Lerner, I think, very beautifully says about John's writing and about the contingency of life and the moment and the present, and not to be nostalgic about the past, but really, really living here and now and thinking about that and writing about that. That's how the film accidentally became what it became.
I suppose we set out to do only one relatively modest thing, which is to introduce people who don't know John to John. That's it. And yes, we set ourselves the task of doing like 1 yard, and then we did 1 yard, and then we went, let's do 4. But you can never get enough John Berger. Honestly, I swear to you, go and buy his books. And we are really, really sorry that we can't bring him here today. He came to Berlin, he was going to be here with us, and he's not well. And so we're even happy we made the film now, because at least you've got a taste of why he might be a wonderful person to be sitting up here and talking to you today.
I would like to continue with the question, Tilda, to you and to all of you. because I have the impression that John is among the living artists, writers, the one who aims almost desperately to collaborating with other artists from other fields. Jean Moore is mentioned in the film, The Seventh Man, but has lots of artistic collaborations over the borders of the different arts. I would like to know, did John felt in your film, or did you talk about that really as not just as the object or the protagonist, really as a collaborator and in his own right?
I wish he were here to answer that question. I'd like to hear his answer, but he expresses great pleasure when he sees the film, and I think if there's one thing that we can be